If there's one thing that's constant throughout the baseball season, it's change. Good teams become bad, bad teams look good, and there's always new players popping up that should be of interest to you in fantasy. This week, looking on the waiver wire, there's a couple of new pitchers that I'm very intrigued by, so I'm actually going to start out with that position. But I feel like the first name here, are we really doing this? I guess. All right. Alek Manoah. Here we go. We're really going to get sucked in by this? Are we really going to go and spend some fab, put him on our roster? Are we ready to potentially be hurt bad again? I honestly am still trying to figure out how we got here. You know the story with Alek Manoah. 2022 was a breakout. One of the best starting pitchers in the game, honestly. And then 2023, one of the biggest busts, probably the biggest actual bust in fantasy, because it was an injury that cost him the second half of the season. He was so bad that he got sent down and then he got hurt. And what's incredible is that this offseason, despite all the talk of his, weight management and workout regimen and this rehab and all this stuff, he was again horrible in the spring, and then an 8.69 ERA and a whip of almost 2 across 5 minor league starts. And yet somehow that earned him a call-up to Toronto again. And then his first major league start of this season, he was again horrible. So then the most obvious thing happened after that. He pitched 2 straight scoreless 7-inning outings against good teams. I really don't have any explanation for it. I'm not even sure if I want to try to dive into the numbers or anything. It's beyond comprehension. But here we go. Alek Manoah now, after looking horrible for over a year straight, all of a sudden has been dominant for 2 straight starts. So I'm just going to say this. He's still owned in fewer than half of Yahoo leagues, which I totally understand. If you want to take that chance and see if he's back, go for it. If you are a little more risk averse like I am, maybe just leave this alone and let somebody else take that on. Maybe he is great rest of the season. Maybe he's regained his old form. Maybe he's even better. I'm not going to pretend to understand here. I'm just going to say if he's out there and you're interested, this is the time to take the plunge. Now, slightly less risky, but you never know with young pitchers. The Braves just called up A.J. Smith-Shawver again, and he wound up pitching an abbreviated outing, but still 4 1/3 scoreless innings against the Cubs. Smith-Shawver definitely worth getting excited about. This is the number 1 prospect in the Braves system. You might remember last year he did get called up and wound up making 5 starts in 2023, pitched to a 4.26 ERA and a 1.11 whip. It was solid, but, had to see if he would earn that spot again this spring, and man, he didn't. And this is exactly why we haven't seen him until now. In the spring, wound up giving up 12 earned runs in just over 10 innings of work. And this is when you remember this is a kid who's just 21 years old, and so they said, all right, we don't need him anyways. We've got pieces in the rotation now that work, but now they don't have Spencer Strider, their ace for the season, and some of these guys like Bryce Elder and other rookies they've tried out just haven't worked. So finally, it was time for A.J. Smith-Shawver, and, well, so far, so good. Now, part of the reason he didn't even go 5 innings in this first start was not just because they want to ease him into things. I don't think that's really it. It's because he was up to 87 pitches already, 55 for strikes, so didn't have impeccable command. Still going to take a little bit of time, so I don't expect dominance, and I don't expect him to be lights out, maybe necessarily going forward either, but this is a guy with a ton of talent. He will have some of those games that make you raise your eyebrows and say, yeah, this is somebody I want on my team, but you have to, of course, expect there will be some bumps along the way. That brings me to another exciting, but maybe slightly unpredictable young pitcher, Taj Bradley, Tampa Bay Rays. Now, he's definitely not a rookie anymore, exceeded the threshold last season, made a lot of starts. I did talk about him a couple of weeks ago before he was activated off the IL. So he's now had a couple of starts under his belt. The last one, not so good, gave up 5 earned runs. Again, like I always say with these young pitchers, there's going to be ups and downs, and his first couple of starts after being activated, he was looking great, so you knew some negative regression was inevitable, and this was it. But even in this bad start, he actually wound up going 7 innings and striking out 10, so there's still some positives you can take away from it. All told, right now, he's got an ERA of an even 4, a whip under 1, and, most importantly, 32.4% strikeout rate. And actually, I'd say even more importantly, Walk rate of only 4.2%. That is exactly what we're looking for. The strikeouts are high, the walks aren't. He has not been victimized by the home run ball too much. Of course, that was the problem in this last outing. But still, we've seen improvements from last year. That's what we need. His next start against the Kansas City Royals, nothing to be frightened of. So again, he's still out there, which he is in a decent amount of leagues. I think now's the time to pick him up, especially if he's getting dropped after his latest outing. Now let's revisit Simeon Woods Richardson again. Been talking about him for a couple of weeks. This guy is not nearly as electrifying in terms of stuff as some of these other pitchers I've already talked about, but he's just getting the job done. He has been effective. Also had kind of a short outing this last time. That's totally on the manager. He was only up to 77 pitches, 4 2/3 scoreless innings, and yet Rocco Baldelli just doesn't like us to have nice things in fantasy. That's why he jerks around the closers back and forth and didn't let Woods Richardson get a well-deserved win, even though he was just 1 out away. But that aside, let's just look at how Woods Richardson has performed on the season. You know, this is somebody who has kept our ratios nice and low. He's got a 2.57 ERA and a 1.11 whip on the season so far, and he's been starting now for a few weeks. The reason he's still out there in 3/4 of fantasy leagues is because he's only earned 1 win on the season, and the strikeout rate is only 18%. So yeah, the Ks are going to be lacking. He's not somebody who's just going to generate a ton of whiffs, right? But he's getting soft contact. He's been very effective. The wins are still kind of fluky. I know things like what just happened, getting pulled right before he could earn the win, but still, I'm not going to chase wins too much necessarily. Minnesota has been winning lately, so I think they will come in time. More than ever, I say early in the season, and we're still just basically a quarter of the way through the season, that's when you want to focus more on the ratios because you really can't catch up that much, at least in a roto league, on ERA and whip when you get to the second half of the season. It's really hard to do. It's a little easier to try to catch up on some things like strikeouts and wins, but all told, Woods Richardson looks like he should be a back-end starter in most fantasy leagues. Another back-end starter type is Cole Irvin. He's been either a fifth starter, spot starter type for a couple of teams in his career. This year, the Orioles. Had not been in the rotation, but it looks like he's back. John Means, brutal setback. Man, he looked like he was going to be back. He's been effective in his first couple of starts after coming off the IL, missing almost an entire year, and now he's back in the shelf. Who knows how long he'll be gone, but it definitely doesn't look good because it's his left elbow. That means right now Cole Irvin back in the rotation. Now, he actually filled in for Means after he was pulled early in that game and wasn't really good. He gave up 3 runs in about 3 innings. So that raised his ERA, but only to a 3.15 ERA. He's got a 1.09 whip. So this is a game where, again, I know this is not like a very good excuse, but he wasn't a starter. He maybe wasn't ready to go 3 innings that early in the game. But still, point is, Irvin has been pretty good this season. He's playing for a good team, so hey, wins are definitely more possible with him. Now, also a guy where the strikeouts aren't going to come. You're going to get a K rate right now, 16%. That's pretty low. So as long as you can, afford that trade-off, maybe you will get some wins from Irvin at least, though, because he can go 5-6 innings at a time. He's not going to just be an opener type. He's pitched a lot of innings before. And again, playing for a good club, as long as you know that you're not getting those Ks. Otherwise, he might be helpful to your squad. And if there's a closer you should be seeking out right now, it's the one that I think is, or mostly will be, the closer for the Mets. We know Edwin Diaz is out temporarily. Reed Garrett did just pick up a save. Look, I talked about Reed Garrett weeks ago when Edwin Diaz was fine, when he wasn't getting saves. Reed Garrett has been so good this year as a setup guy. He deserves a spot on fantasy teams just for the help he's giving you with the ERA, the whip, and the Ks. His strikeout rate, unfortunately, has dropped down to 40%. Remember, it was at 50 for a while. But look, this guy just gave up a run, and that raised his ERA to 1.04. He's been lights out. He's been dominant. He will get some saves now while Diaz figures things out. He's still available in about half of fantasy leagues. You need saves, or even if you don't, I still think Garrett is just worth having. All right, now let's get into the hitters. And first up, are we doing this again? All right, I know I don't have to mention or be in at all on Byron Buxton, Apparently I am, because here we go talking about him, and I have to admit I did just pick him up in one of my leagues. Look, I'm as skeptical as anybody. I was completely off Buxton, did not draft him anywhere, even with a last round pick this year. So why now? Well, it's mid-season almost. People are getting hurt. You got some spots to fill there. You need some upside. You're lacking power. You take somebody who's got the potential of a Byron Buxton, and I don't even mean over the course of a season. I mean just at the very least for a week or two, somebody who can give you some pop. Well, maybe Buxton can do that if he manages to stay off the injured list for at least a week or two. Now, I say this because Buxton did just have a multi-home run game. He's only been off the IL now for less than a week, so let's see how long this lasts. I'm not even going to go over the whole saga of Byron Buxton, he who would be king in fantasy. Only over 350 at-bats once in 10 seasons. And I'll admit, even just the small sample size we have from this year, there are a lot of red flags here. Not the good red like the StatCast numbers, but the red flags, which mean, maybe he's just not ready to be a fantasy stud anymore, even if he's healthy. Only a 2% walk rate, and that walk rate has gone really far down the last couple of years after it looked like he got that in order. The plate discipline is not good. The speed is still good, but he's not actually stealing bases. I think all that's left here is the power. And yes, the power potential is legit, and that's the only reason I'm going to recommend him at all. But I will just say, just be ready to pull the plug at a moment's notice. All right, now I've talked about Luis Matos in San Francisco for 2 weeks running. I first said before he even debuted for this season on Beat the Breakout, I said it was time to grab him. And then last week on Waiver Wire, it's time to add him if he's still out there. So instead of talking about Matos again, let's just say there's another Giants outfielder that you could be keeping your eye on, and it's Heliot Ramos. In terms of context and situation, a lot of similarities between Ramos and Matos. Young outfielder, had some time up with the Giants before, didn't really have a lot of success. Someone who's a little bit more power over hit tool compared to Matos, but also is now starting to figure things out. He, in fact, just hit his second home run of the young season. He's batting .296 right now. Unlike Matos, who, again, I do prefer, and is hitting leadoff, Ramos is hitting 7th, at least these days, but that does give him some RBI opportunities, and he's actually doing pretty well in terms of driving in runs so far. The slugging percentage is there. I don't know if the average will stay, but hey, he's actually not doing too bad. The K rate is not great, right? It's about 30%, but again, this is a little bit more of the slugger type, so if the power and the RBIs are coming in, I think we can excuse that. And the great thing here is that Ramos is available pretty much everywhere. Kind of surprised nobody's buying into him. Remember, he was kind of one of the Giants' top hitting prospects a year ago. And I get that, in his small sample, he hasn't really impressed. And just maybe the Giants aren't that exciting an organization, let's face it, especially for hitters. But now there's a lot to be interested in between those two guys. And hey, Marco Luciano's also up. Let's see if he can make an impact. All right, now I'm finally going to talk Cardinals. Yeah, and I'm talking about hitters too. I know I've kind of railed on this offense all year, deservedly so. They're still one of the worst offenses in the league, but as I said, the top things change fast. And this week, the Cardinals decided, let's score some runs. Now, the one hitter I think that most people are interested in is Lars Nootbaar. He's someone that has been kind of a trendy sleeper. Early this preseason he was, last year at times he was. And as Chris likes to say, he's right now profiling as a StatCast hero. If you look at all the red there on his page, like all the numbers show that he's doing great. The problem is that the game is played on the field, not on paper or in spreadsheets. And so while the StatCast and the expected numbers are really good, he's still only hitting .213. Slugging percentage, .386. He's got 5 home runs, 2 steals. Nothing that really excites you when you look at that. But look, he could be doing better. This offense continues to click. He should benefit. So I'm not all in on Nootbaar, but he is definitely intriguing. Look, last year in not even a full season's worth of at-bats, 426 to be exact, 14 home runs, 11 steals. So he can help you among the counting stats a fair amount. But there's actually a Cardinals hitter I do like a little bit better. Not sure exactly what the ceiling is for Mason Wynn. I do know he's got some speed. I know he's hitting for average, and now against left-handed pitchers, he's become the leadoff hitter. Batting .295, got 7 steals on the season, and he just had his second home run of the season. Now the appeal here is the speed, like I mentioned, but also runs, because if he's hitting at the top of the order on certain days, and if this offense is actually driving in runs, he will score a fair amount. He's been solid. He's more like the middle infielder type in your 12-team deeper leagues, not somebody that really needs to be owned in shallow leagues, or if you don't have a middle infield spot. I don't know that I would love having him as my everyday shortstop. Surely there are better options, but hey, we're getting deeper here, or if you just need some cheap steals, I think Mason Wynn is somebody to look at. And then my real deep league special here, or if you're just looking for some power upside, let's circle back to maybe another post-hype sleeper here in Mark Vientos of the Mets. Is it possible that he's taking over third base for Brett Baty? Because lately, even against right-handed pitchers, Vientos has been getting the starts. Baty seems like he's fading. Look, Vientos hasn't gotten many ABs at the major league level this year. Late last year he came on and was very up and down, wound up mostly disappointing, especially because he struck out too much. The batting average wasn't good. This year, again, very small sample. He's been good, definitely has cut down on the strikeouts, but he's got to prove it over a longer extended period of time at the big league level. So this is let's wait and see mode maybe for most of us, or again, deep league, you can stash him, see what happens. I mean, he did hit a home run the other day. Again, looking better in terms of plate discipline. He's really got nothing to prove at the AAA level, but he does have to prove that he's not going to wind up just being a quad A player who can't really ever hack it on a daily basis in the majors, but doesn't really fit in AAA either. Those are the players I'm targeting on the waiver wire in my fantasy leagues, and you should probably be on the lookout for them too. If you're looking for some up-and-coming prospects, some stashes, well, Beat the Breakout is right here.